Welcome to today's first free class, so to speak. My goal with giving this information is one, to empower you guys to see whether or not this is something that you are interested in doing, or kind of to take some of the like scariness out of it. 'Cause I know when I first started, I was overwhelmed. And I know, if you're new and you've just kind of joined the group, you might be feeling that same like sense of overwhelm, like, oh, this seems like a lot. So I kind of want to take some of the mystery out of it to help bridge the gap between whether this is something you want to do or not. With that being said, I won't be able to go fully in depth on how to reline a train case, but my goal is to provide you with enough information that you can decide if you want to um, take a stab at it on your own, or maybe if you feel like you do need my support and want to take some of my classes. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me today. Um, if you don't know who I am, I'm Rachel Barlow. I have been relining train cases for 4 years, which is shocking to me. It doesn't feel like 4 years, but so I started kind of right before the pandemic started. And I had my own train case that I relined, which is right here. This was my grandma's makeup box that she used to travel, that I acquired at some point. I don't remember when. I know that my grandma gave it to me. Actually, I think it was her mom, so my great grandma's. And I use it for a traveling sewing kit. This was my first attempt. And when I look at it now, I kind of laugh at some of the mistakes that I made on it. But it also reminds me of how far I've came and to not be scared to try new things. So I ripped the lining out of this, and it sat for a few months before I did anything with it, because I just thought, oh my gosh, that's the like, what have I done? Also, I don't do alterations, so I always had like all this sewing stuff in here just in case something came up. So I have like fixed a couple of wedding dresses on their wedding day, that kind of stuff. So if you're not like somebody who sews and you're thinking, what am I going to do with this once I reline it? There are a lot of different things that you can do. So don't feel like it has to be just all sewing related all the time. That's just what my like main hobby is. So that's why that's in there. So when I did this, I used hot glue to glue my ruffle in. I just gathered my ruffle. I didn't have a ruffle foot at that time. Most of the glue and stuff in here was just whatever I had on hand. I wasn't worried about the longevity of it, and I was just kind of taking a stab in the dark. So if you're there, I know everybody doesn't have the money to just go start a new hobby and buy all the things that you need for that hobby. So I encourage you to find what you have and test the waters with that. So I always say, if say you like go out and you get one of the more harder to find colors like purple or pink, and you want to do that, but you haven't, like you don't have any experience yet, I would encourage you to find possibly a free or a really inexpensive train case that you can try out first. So sorry, I'm like, I always, if you've taken any of my classes, you already know, but when I start doing classes for the first time in a while, I am like so nervous in the beginning, just because I have to like get back into the swing of like presenting. So forgive me if I stumble over my words a little bit. So to reline a train case, you need a train case. It doesn't have to be a train case. The same techniques apply to basically anything boxy. I've done jewelry boxes. I haven't done any full-size luggage yet, but I have several that I do plan to do. So they are on my horizon. I just haven't done them yet. This really, like, the technique is really a good technique for anything. So you may find that as your skill gets better with this, that you can apply it to other things. So you need a train case or something to reline. You don't have to buy the tools that I use. So a lot of people might see that in my videos, I have a staple gun that's a few $100s. I have that because I do a lot of train cases and I am doing these as a service for other people. So it's a little bit different. If you're doing this like on a personal level, or you might be relining cases for your friends or to give as gifts, you don't need a $300 staple gun. There are ways that you can make sure that everything is secure without the need for that staple gun. I have it because I also do like upholstery projects and stuff, and I have used it in those projects as well. If it is something that you know that you'll use, it is a good investment. The staple gun I have, which happens to be across the room, is a Senko brand staple gun, and it has the smallest head with the smallest crown. So the length of the actual staple is 3/16 leg by 3/16 crown, and it's very tiny. That's why I bought that specific one. There are other ones, and you can use like a 1/4" one as well, but you just have to make sure that the depth isn't going to shoot through your train case. So if you have like one like this that I just showed, and you used the 1/4" staple, it will shoot through the side and you'll have little, pieces poking out. So that's kind of why I say I have that one, because it's the smallest one on the market. Again, you don't need it though. When you're starting, the first thing that you want to do is check the smells of your train case. And you'll know if you're getting it in the mail, you're going to open it and be like, oh, this smells terrible. The first thing I do when I get a train case that smells terrible is, if I can't remove the lining that day, I will take these charcoal bags that I get on Amazon and put some in there and close it up. My next goal is to get to that, taking the lining out, because the majority of the time your lining is where all of your smells are trapped. So any perfume that might have spilled, any of that is going to be in that lining. I take my lining out, I put it in a bag, and I close that bag up, because I need the lining as a guide for my measurements, but I don't want to throw it away. So I usually will just bag it into a Ziploc bag and put it somewhere where it's not going to make the stuff around it smell. So maybe you have like a clear tote, you can put that bag in, or, you can put it in the garage, something like that. It's important to also take pictures of your train case before you do anything with it and as you go through the process, because you might find that you start it and then you're not able to pick it back up for a couple of weeks and you can't remember how it all went together. So you need those pictures as a reference, but also to encourage you as you go along. You might hit a roadblock where you feel like, honestly, learning is really hard, especially for adults. When we are not feeling secure, we want to be like, why even bother? I'm terrible at this, and just get rid of it. But don't discredit yourself. Give yourself a little bit of grace. Use those pictures to motivate you and show you how much you have accomplished already. Be proud of the work that you're putting in to the growth that is learning a new skill. So I take pictures, and even I've done so many. I've done like 40, and I still take pictures because different brands are built differently. And I want to put my lining back in in the way that matches the train case, unless I know I'm deviating for a specific reason. So I take pictures, take my lining out, and store it. Once I'm ready, I come back and I use those lining pieces as my measurements for my new pieces. Now, I know I am going through this really fast, and you might be taking notes. Remember, this is recorded. You'll get a copy of this recording to download and watch. So if you are going to use this to work through a project, you'll be able to pause me and go along and take notes from there. So when I have my old lining out, I'm kind of using those measurement pieces as what I say a jumping off point. So my new lining pieces may not be exactly the same as the lining I took out. Part of that is I'm using different fabrics than they are. They may be thicker, they may be thinner, they may not move and breathe in the same way. So we need to make accommodations there for tolerances, right? So you might have to like trim your pieces up. They might end up being a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger than the pieces you took out. But having those base measurements helps to prevent like miscutting, right? So if you know that the piece you took out is 6 by 10 and you accidentally cut it to be 7 by 11, well, you can still trim it up, right? Well, you're not ruining anything. And you have that in your mind, like, oh, okay, well, it's that big. But if you didn't have that and you cut it 4 by 10, you have to recut a whole new piece. So that's kind of why we have those measurements there as a reminder of how close we need to be to that. And just a reminder, I did email this in the first email. It is also in the group. It's just kind of a simple guide. So if you want to, you can print this off and use this as well. It's kind of what I'm referencing as we're going along today. So use your old lining as your template for your new lining. One of the biggest questions I get is, what am I using for that base of my lining? I use Peltex 71F. That F as in Frank. I saw that the captioning changed it to S. It's F as in Frank. So 71F is single-sided Peltex. And what that means is this side has iron-on adhesive, and this side is smooth with nothing. I like to do this because I can iron my fabric on to this side and then turn my edges and stitch it down, and it's nice and pretty and flat with no bubbles because of this ironing. Now, if you're not sewing, I would recommend getting the two-sided Peltex, and I think that one might be 72. I'm not quite sure, but you just make sure that it says that it's two-sided. So it'll have iron on both sides and you won't have to sew anything. The good thing is you're using a lot of glue. So if you need no sew options, just sub that out and glue it in places instead of sewing. There are a lot of different ways that you can do it without sewing, and really it'd probably be smart for me to do a whole no sewing class so you can see from start to finish for those who don't sew, but you can kind of work around it. And of course, anytime you have questions about stuff, post it in the group. Like, not just me, but there are other people in there as well who want to help you and give advice on how to get your projects done. So, that's why it's there. It's a resource for everybody. My primary goal as an educator is to help you find the skills and the knowledge to get across the finish line. So I do this as a hobby. It's not my primary source of income or anything like that. I'm not trying to make some like giant train case corporation or anything. I just want to help prevent these beautiful pieces of our heritage from ending up in the landfill when they are very usable still, and they don't make them like this anymore. So anytime you have questions, please post them. So when you're creating your new lining, you're going to use this Peltex as your new lining core, we'll say. Your fabric's going to go over this stuff. I use this for everything. I will say that I have noticed if you're going to be relining with like a solid like this, Peltex does really show its creases. So when you've got curves and stuff, you'll see a lot of that creasing. Where a stabilizer like Decoville, this is Decoville Heavy Duty. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I just pronouncing it how I read it. But it doesn't crease as much. So when you fold the Decoville, it doesn't show the creasing as much. So it's a good sub if you know that the prints that you're going to be using might show creasing, and you can always buy some and test it out before you put it in your train case. It is a little bit more expensive than Peltex, so I kind of try to use it where I know I'm going to need it versus all over. Just as a cost savings. I mean, we all know how the economy is today, and I'm a big advocate for saving money where you can. So that's one of the areas that I choose to save a little bit. Now, once you create your lining pieces, you're kind of just going to look at the way they had done the previous piece, and you're going to follow those same pieces, right? The same process. Bear with me here for a second. Okay. These are lining pieces from an American Tourister. Now, I will say, if you are going to be doing an American Tourister or a Samsonite, I do have those classes in April. And I offer a lot of tips on how to work around the curves and stuff in there. Because I found that in doing those two specific ones, there are many like little tricks that you can do to make it look a little bit more polished. So if that's you, please feel free to join. You can join both, join one, whichever. And those are there on the website if you would like to join us. We do have several people that have already signed up. So this is a lid piece that I took out, and you can see this is the cardboard that's on the back because they have a mirror that snaps in. So you might get your train case and see this and be afraid to rip this out, but it's not attached to the actual train case. These snaps are attached to the lining. And they have them made to where they're cut exactly the same, not folded over or anything. So you can copy exactly that if you want to, because the trim piece that you remove before you remove that, it is like you're finishing. I don't know if I have any that haven't been gutted, or I would show you. Your wall piece looks like this, just a long rectangle. And they do theirs. This one you can't see because it actually tore. So it's actually bigger than this, but it tore all the way down. It's folded over. Like this one is still attached to the bottom piece, but see, like right here, it is folded over and stitched. So if you're not going to be sewing, you can just fold that over and iron it to the back side. But then again, here's the bottom piece with that raw edge, and the raw edge is covered by the wall piece. Almost all of the train cases are made in the same way. The difference is which part is stacked on top of which part. You can change those depending on your project. You don't have to follow exactly the way that they did it. You just want to make sure that whatever ends up on the outside is finished completely on both sides. So what I'm saying with finished is the edges are complete. There are no raw edges. So like this is an example of a finished wall piece with a pocket. So on the back side, this is a raw edge that's stitched to the back. So finished means that all your raw edges on the back side. So when you look at it, ignoring this part here, when you look at it, it looks completely done. There's no raw edges facing out. Now this little piece here is covered up by the hinge cover. So that's why that is raw on that piece. Oh, I'm sorry. My watch is trying to record what I'm saying. Okay, so let me pause here for a second and pop into our contact form where we had a couple of questions. So I want to make sure I'm not skipping over any of the things that people had mentioned. Okay, so the first one was fabric amounts, special tools needed, and order of reconstruction. So when the order of reconstruction is the same that you take it out. So when you're ripping your lining out, just write down what you removed first, second, third, and you're going to reverse that when you're putting it back together. So there isn't an official order of reconstruction. It depends on what works best for you. So I am neurodivergent, which means I have ADHD. I have a household of people that are different neurotypes. So I am an advocate for figuring out what works best for you. There's no right or wrong here. What works best for you is what is right. So for me, the first thing I put back in is usually my lid and my bottom piece. And what that looks like, this is a lid piece. It has raw edges because these are going to go up and they're going to be covered by trim. And this is where my Peltex is. So these go in first, then my wall piece and my lid trim, and then my hinge cover. And then I'm done. Now, if you have an American Tourister, you have post screws that you have to worry about. That's a little bit different. I'm not going to go over that today. That is something that's available to discuss in the class. There aren't really any like special tools that you have to do this. I would say, you know, a good set of pliers, eye protection, gloves, the chemicals that you might need to clean it, which I'll show you what I use here in just a minute. Those are really it. A paintbrush and Mod Podge. Like you can do it without a lot of tools. So you don't really need to go out and buy tools. But if you're going to be doing, like say you're going to be doing 5, you might want to get tools just to make some of the process easier. I know that a lot of the times if you're taking lining out for the first time, it can be really tough, especially if you're doing American Tourister. You really got to put muscle in there sometimes and just kind of rip at it. Everything is a square or a rectangle. So as long as you have like kind of, you know, even if it's ripped, you know where the line should be. So you're going to just in your mind when you're taking the measurements, envision that that's a hard line, even though it might have ripped. It can be quite a workout. I have had to ask my husband to rip out lining on some of them before because let me tell you, I was like drenched in sweat, just like, ugh, you know, really like working it. And I'm like, dude, I cannot get this. And he's like, well, here, just let me try. And even him, like, it can be tough. American Tourister knew what they were doing when they made that formaldehyde based glue. It's tough. If you're allergic to formaldehyde, it's in all of these. I will bet you almost every single one of these has formaldehyde based glue. That's what was used at that time. That is also one of the things that smells. So if you're allergic to formaldehyde, make sure that you're taking the proper precautions for that. So let's go back. Required fabric amounts. You can do this with about 1.5 yards of fabric. I always tell my students 4 to 6 back quarters. And if you're not in, if you don't shop the out of print Tula market, you're probably looking at me like, who in the heck is going around buying fat quarters? Us crazy people that live in that Tula pink world, we do, and various other designers, not just Tula, but we buy a lot of fat quarters. I say fat quarters because I like to use a variety of fabrics when I'm relining, and that helps me do that. But if you don't want to buy fat quarters, you can just buy a few 1/2 yards of different fabrics that you want, or even maybe 1/4 yard, depending on where you're using it. So if you're going to use it in the lid, 1/4 yard won't be wide enough. So you'll need to buy 1/2 yard for that. And every train case is different on how much you will need. So take your measurements from your lining and use that to help you figure out your fabric requirements. How much time is involved and what to look for when choosing a case. I have a video, if you're on Instagram, well, you're probably on Facebook and TikTok. I have a video that talks about picking out a train case. I will repost that video so you can find it easily, but I would refer back to that video to help you pick out a train case, just to save us some time today. How long it takes. So it takes me usually like a week of working increments to get a train case done. If I was sitting down and that's what I was doing, since I have a full-time job and kids and all that stuff, honestly, it takes me about 6 months from the start to finish of a train case. And my customers and my friends, they know that, and they're very patient, and I love them for it. But that's kind of the time frame that I give myself. I have some in here that I started 3 years ago that I don't have finished. And I have some that I started a year ago that I don't have finished. So that the time, like working time that it takes, really varies depending on all the different options you choose. So you might choose to embroider your lid pieces or add extra embellishments. This is a great place to use some ribbon that you might have fell in love with 10 years ago and never figured out where to use it. Use it here. You know, a lot of the train cases, once you reline them, you have that, like, I need to like store it open so I can see it. This is a great place to use those things because they won't see the wear and tear that maybe on the exterior of a bag they might have seen. Let's see. There are 75 people that entered comments in here. So bear with me while I have read them, every single one of them. But I just have to go through and find the ones. Gain more confidence. One person said that. You can do this. You absolutely can. And it might be scary. It might be a little bit unsettling. If you're a person that feels that way, I would encourage you to take a class with me, because you can do this. And I want to be able to support you if you need me to. Classes are $45. They're 4 lessons. The last lesson's really a wrap up. So it's kind of like you know, if you ran into snags, that kind of thing. But I would encourage you to do that. Painting the outside comes up a lot. I have not done it yet. There are some amazingly talented people in our group that do that. Kathy definitely does. I'm not sure if Sarah has or not, but there are several people, and I'm sorry if I'm skipping somebody. There are a lot of people that do, and they are wonderful at it. I'm not like a hand. Oh, Linda asked, are your class schedules listed on the Facebook page? They are, and I will repost that so that everybody can see what April looks like. And just as this one, all those are recorded as well, so that if you work on Saturday or you're out of town or something comes up, you can go back and watch it. And just like this, you can download it as well. It is stored online for a limited period of time, like 6 months to a year. So you have access for a while. It's not like you miss class and then it's gone. You have time. But I'll make sure that that content is there. I don't paint my stuff because I'm not like a hand painting type of artist. I cannot draw very well, so I don't do any of that stuff. What I have seen from other people is you want a good primer. So make sure that you're getting something that will bond well with your train case. So like the Rust-Oleum, or I think one of the ones that was recommended is the like the car. I'm drawing a blank. It's like the automotive prep primer some people use. So if you're gonna paint it, I encourage you to like kind of play around and see what works best for you. The good thing is you can always paint it again, right? Tips on cleaning. We'll do that right now because that one is like, that is honestly one of the most important parts. If you don't get it cleaned well, it's going to stink forever and you're never going to want to use it. So I'm just going to go over my two like heaviest hitters because they are like what has carried me through everything. And that's these two. So this is Goo Gone, and I happen to use the Pro Power Strength because this is what my Walmart carries. And this is like what I use for everything. It's a citrus-based cleaner, so I always make sure to use gloves so it doesn't dry my skin out. And if it does dry my train case out, I'll treat that after I'm done cleaning with Armor All, like the car polish for your seats and stuff. I will use that to restore some of that moisture to it. You can use a leather treatment as well. I also use this Goof Off. It's also Pro Strength. This is one of the ones that you should be cautious with. It will strip the color out of every single one of these red train cases. So when I use this, I might use it on like a scuff. But I'm using it like with a Q-tip right where that is and nowhere else. Because if it's got like a luster or a sheen to it, this will take that off and it will be like just a matte finish. So this is like, I use this as very, very, very specifically on the spot that I need to treat it. So if it smells on the inside, I do a few different things. So I use those charcoal bags. I did a really cheap vodka wash to help draw out anything that might be saturated. I've done newspaper and coffee grounds where you put it in there, close it up for a while, and then open it up, dump those coffee grounds out and let it breathe for a while. And I kind of do all of these things. I do the vodka wash first, usually. Then I come back a week later, smell it to see, is it still smelling? Then I might do the coffee grounds, close that up for a week, open it, dump it out, leave it open, come back, smell it, see how it smells. My very last step in once I've gone through it, and if you have any like mold or mildew or anything like that, you can also rinse it with ammonia. You can bleach it as well. Obviously, don't do those two together. Those may help as well. So I kind of do it in phases to see if it's working. My last step though is Kills primer. There are different types. So if you've got some mold or mildew, make sure you're picking that one. If you're just attacking odor, you can just use the odor one. And you may just paint the inside. I recommend painting it 2 times. So you do that first time, let it dry according to the instructions, come back and do it again. That will help reduce or eliminate the odors that you're smelling. And it will really, and if there's like a little bit of a hint of perfume or something like that, you may not be able to get rid of it. I get asked a lot, what do you do about the gouges on the outside that you can't fix? You can clean them up, but they're still there. I use it as a story of the life that my train case lived before me. So even if there's like a little bit of a hint of perfume, like, is that really so bad? Just don't put something in there you're going to wear, you know? Now I'm saying like a nice smelling perfume, not something that makes you want to throw up. Like, I just kind of like look at these pieces as they had a life way before me. I don't want them to look brand new. I want them to look like they're vintage. I want them to, you know, I want to respect the journey that they have taken. And I know this is just an object and it might seem a little weird to hear a grown woman say that, but that's how I feel. So I see this and I think I don't want it to look brand new. I want it to look like my great grandma carried this. That's why it's significant to me. If it looked brand new, then why not just buy a brand new piece of luggage and use it? There are some really good ones out there. It's a part of my history, absolutely. And I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, it's just important to me. I will say that on red train cases, let me grab one. This is the smallest, like, not toy train case that I've ever seen. She's really little and super cute. But you see that line right there where there's discoloration? Nothing I do ever will take that away. Whatever caused this is saturated into this vinyl. So no matter what cleaning I'm doing, it's not going to go away. Red is notorious for this. You'll see often in American Touristers that they'll have these like, on the red ones, they'll have these like black areas. They're not completely black, they're just darkened. You won't be able to clean those off. They'll be there. You might be able to minimize them, but they'll still be there. And that's one of the things that I've learned to embrace it, because you can't make it go away, right? Like, it's still going to exist, but it also doesn't interfere with the functionality of the train case itself. So when you're picking out a train case, maybe you're in person, you can see that. If you're online, just look for those little clues. If it's something that you think, oh, I wouldn't like that, then avoid those red colors. They can be a little bit sneaky, and you find that you bought one and you didn't know, and you got it and it has it. If that happens, use it as one to kind of learn the process, right? Okay. Sorry, I'm just skimming, making sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, one of the trickier things to make is the ruffle. I use a ruffle foot on my sewing machine. If you don't have one, you can use a gathering stitch to do it. There are a lot of tutorials online on how to make a ruffle. I would encourage you to check those out. I'm in the process of rebuilding my website with a web designer so that these resources are much easier to get. Right now, I have stuff in my Google Classroom and I post stuff on Facebook, but it can be kind of tricky to navigate finding all of that content when you want to, especially on Facebook. So look forward to the future of finding those resources easily on my website. But that's what I would recommend, that you look at some Ruffle tutorials, because honestly, I make them different every single time I make them. And I just kind of go with how I feel. So when you're putting your lining back into your train case, I always say that I use Mod Podge hard coat, and every single time I have class, if you've taken class with me, you know I never have a bottle over here. Hold on, I actually do. I have a bad bottle that Michael sent me. This is what this Mod Podge looks like. Why do I use this hard coat Mod Podge instead of any of the others? I don't have a reason. This is the one that I like the most. And because I have a neurodivergent brain, this is the one that I use. The other ones work just as well. So if you go to Hobby Lobby or you shop at Michael's or Joann's and they don't have this one, pick up one that you think will work and try that. So, you know, Mod Podge is a good sealer, and this one takes a long time to cure. So let me see if I can actually read it. Okay. Let cure for 4 weeks. So that's why I use this, because what I have seen with this is once I glue my lining pieces in, and if I came back to one of my train cases that I did last year and try to rip that lining out, it will come out, but it will not be reusable because it will tear, you know, the fabric is going to give because of the curing on this glue. So that's why I use this specific product, but there are other products that you can use. You don't have to use this one. You just want to make sure that what you are using won't, you know, be tacky to the touch, won't break the bond if it gets moisture in it, right? Those are like the 2 biggest things. If you need something that's if you need say you need your bottom piece to be smooth and wipeable, get the iron-on vinyl or use a product like Odie Coat. Those work really well for that. So when you're putting your lining back in, really it's a song and dance that you play with your glue. And honestly, like, I glue my bottom, put my piece in, I let that dry, glue my top, put that piece in, let that dry. And usually these are 24-hour increments. You can do your bottom and your lid the same day because they're not going to interfere with each other. But I let it dry and I come back. The next day is when I would put my wall pieces or my trim pieces in. The other thing too is you might have to make changes. So you kind of want to glue that in and step back for a little bit just to make sure that you're not going to have to rip it out. If you need to rip it out, you need to do that within the first 24 hours, because the longer you wait, the more it's curing. And I have found after about 3 days, you're going to have to remake all those pieces that you take out. So yeah, I glue everything in and I let it dry, and I do it in the same order that, you know, I took it out. I'm going to do it in reverse order. And that helps me, for one, it helps me not be overwhelmed because I'm not doing it all on the same day. But 2, if I need to make changes, I'm able to. Now, the other question I get asked a lot is like, how do you get get all your pieces held in there? I use neodymium magnets. None of this stuff, like none of these are secrets that I'm telling you guys, but these are super strong. They're rare earth neodymium magnets, and they are so strong that if you are not careful, they will snap together and break in half. They will also pinch your fingers. They are a danger to small children, and they are really, really strong. So in those places where you can't get like a clip or anything, they're great because you can put this on the inside, this on the outside, and they will apply pressure to help that bond of your glue and your train case come together. And I have a bunch of them. I probably buy another box of them once a year, and I probably have like 5 boxes just because I use them. Now that I have them, I use them in so many other projects too, so they're really great. I have a lot of this stuff in a wish list on my Amazon, which is posted in the group, but I'll bump that back up so you can see easily what products I'm using and what I'm talking about. That's basically the gist of how to reline it. Some of the things that I didn't mention, when you take your lining out, there might be like some batting or some like fluff in there. You don't have to clean all that completely out, smooth, clean it to the best of your ability. That's a question that comes up a lot. How clean does it have to be when I put my new lining in? And what I tell my students is feel it with your hand. If it feels relatively smooth without any like major bumps, then it's probably going to be fine. You want to make sure that your glue will adhere. So like if you had, say it was smooth, but you had something that was like flappy, it wasn't glued down. Well, you want to remove that because that flappiness is still going to be there when you glue whatever. So you don't want to create any bubbles or anything like that. I think that's it. We're almost at an hour. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, post them in the chat. I really just, I'm so happy to see that you are here to even be interested. Linda says, will heat and bond work? I don't know. I haven't used it. Probably. I really think that there are a lot of adhesives that work. I will say I have tried some different like rubber cements and different leather products. My husband does leather tooling as a hobby, and the only reason why I like went away from those things, because they will hold forever, is because the residual smell is very strong. And if you're using your train case and closing it up because of contents that you have inside, it might cause odors over time that you don't want to be there. So that's one of the reasons why I moved away from those products. I always store my train cases with those bamboo, the bamboo charcoal bags. Once my train case is done, that bamboo charcoal bag lives in there forever to reduce moisture and to just help reduce any odors. I will say, after about 6 months of having that charcoal bag, one day when it's sunny out, I'm going to take it back outside, leave it in the sun all day, and bring it back in. It helps to like refresh that charcoal that's in there. Okay, Linda asked another question. 1 second while I pop into our group chat. Okay, and I know I'm like sideways because it turns. I have Peltex Ultra Firm, but it's not adhesive, it's sew in. That will work just fine. When I say glue, am I referring to Mod Podge product? Yes. So anytime that I say glue, I am specifically talking about Mod Podge. I don't use any other adhesive, so it's always Mod Podge. That's just the adhesive that I use, and I always refer to it as glue, and I know it's kind of confusing. That's the product. that I'm using there. If you don't have Peltex 71F or you have another product on hand in terms of like a stabilizer, you can use that. Absolutely. You don't have to have iron-on type. Like, you can just stitch your pieces together. You know, I used to use poster board. When I first started, I used poster board, and I eventually moved away from that because it's not very pliable, or, and I don't think it holds up better. It holds up as well long term, but you can use anything that you have, really. So the Mod Podge soaks through the fabric and the Peltex. No. So when I glue it in, the Mod Podge is on the train case, and it's going to touch the back of this. When I do it, I'm making sure that I don't use so much that it does saturate, because Mod Podge, changes the appearance of your fabric. So I don't use so much that it soaks through. And also, it's very hard to soak through this Peltex 71F. You really have to have a lot to do it. So that's one of the reasons why I use this thick, heavy duty stabilizer, because you don't want to end up with pieces where your Mod Podge has soaked through, but it's not even. And if that does happen, go ahead and treat the outside of your fabric. That will be your best way to save this if you get a little Mod Podge there. And sometimes if you're working at 2 a.m. and being like a little silly child girl, trying to get stuff done when you should be sleeping, you might accidentally spill Mod Podge on your fabric. If that happens, just paint it. Just use that Mod Podge as a treatment of your fabric. It will be just fine. And it's a great way to waterproof your fabric if you don't have any of the iron-on vinyl. I like the iron-on vinyl because it has that shiny finish, and it also doesn't change the appearance of your fabric as much as Mod Podge does. But you just want to make sure you're not using so much glue that it completely saturates and you get splotchy effects on your fabric. But I haven't really had that happen. So I don't know how much glue would cause that. So just kind of play around with it. You don't want to use so little glue that you don't have a good bond, but you don't want to use so much that you have that saturation issue. Excellent questions. Really wonderful. Does anybody have anything else? What do I use to attach the trim? Mod Podge. Believe it or not, Mod Podge will do the job. I know in your mind you're thinking there's no way that it will hold that trim there. Probably 30 of the 40 that I've done have just been Mod Podge holding it. Those other 10 happen to be ones that I could use my staple gun in. As long as you've got a good layer of glue there, it will do the job just fine. I use garage clamps to secure all the way around. Let me get this one real quick, which look like this. This is my garage clamp that I'm referring to. So I use it to hold my trim in place while it dries. And it's great. Yeah, I got these on Amazon super cheap also. You just want to make sure you get the big ones, because the little ones won't have enough throat space for you to really get in there and clamp it. So if you buy a set, make sure that you get one that has a variety of sizes, because the very smallest size you probably won't use very much for this application, just because the throat isn't big enough, isn't deep enough. If you are like kind of worried about the strength of the glue, another option that I have done before I got my staple gun is bought upholstery tacks, which I do have in my store online. And I cut them with flush cutters to be short enough that they won't poke through. But I've used those in just a few areas to add that little bit of extra security. So like on on the hinge cover where you have like some bulk coming together. I've used it there. The key there is that you'll have to trim them because upholstery tacks are pretty long and they can be really difficult to push through. So you might have to get creative with that. So, oh, thank you. Jane says that, thanks so much for this presentation. She's feeling confident. She just needs to dig in and start. You absolutely can. I'm so glad that you joined us today. So the magnets are there to hold the pieces while attaching and assembling. I only use those magnets once I'm gluing stuff in. So I'm using my magnets to apply pressure so that my glue is bonding with my train case and the fabric relined piece. So my pieces are not attached to each other, like they're not sewn. Like this one is, because the glue is still holding it together. So and that's what would happen if you ripped yours out. So really that's what you're doing, is getting that pressure to help that bond get secure and cure perfectly over time. And it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see like what you guys do from here with this information, whether you take a class or whether you do it on your own. I'm so proud of you for having I'm excited to see, because I think every time I see the other fabric that people are using, it's awesome. And I will not lie, I have learned so much from my students. Like, you guys all bring diverse information to the table, and I appreciate you all for that. Okay, so go out, get you a train case, rip all the guts out, and jump in. If you have any questions, feel free to, you can email me, you can post them in the group. I would love to hear them. Please tag me in all of your social medias so I can watch as you make stuff. And thank you for taking the time with me to have this discussion. I hope you guys have a great day. And it was nice to see you all. Bye.